I would like to welcome our presenter today. We have Dr. Dana Harley, an associate professor at UC School of Social Work, and we are thrilled to have you here with us today. Thank you, Dana.
Thank you. So I would just like to start by introducing myself, in addition to the lovely intro from Maggie, and just a little bit more about my background, so you'll know what perspectives that I'll be taking throughout our discussion. So I have an MSW and a PhD in social work, and I've spent the last, I want to say decade, but it feels like 2 decades or so, practicing behavioral health, primarily with children and adolescents and their families. I do a lot of work and research around hope and how young people experience hope. So most recently, a colleague and I developed a behavioral health measure looking at hope among vulnerable urban youth. And so that's one of the things that I'm very interested in doing. My passion is certainly around exploring how young people are hopeful and resilient and optimistic. And so I think that this discussion is very timely in that we are in unprecedented times. And I'm sure you've heard that unprecedented like a million times recently. And so if we can think about the impact that this global pandemic has had on us, we can only imagine how our children and young people feel and what they've also experienced. So I'm hoping this discussion will help us with some practical tips and ideas about how to engage our children and young people. And so even if you're not a parent on our call today, maybe you're a teacher or someone who just takes care of children, hopefully you can get some practical ideas and tips about how to engage them through these troubled times. So I'm going to go ahead and start to share my screen. If you have questions throughout, feel free to jump in there if that's okay, Maggie, or you can put them in the chat and we'll make sure we get those answered, okay?
Yeah, absolutely. I will keep an eye on chat and
Okay.
call out any questions folks put in there.
Gotcha. Alrighty. All right. Hopefully everyone can see the screen.
Yep.
Okay, wonderful. So I have a few slides that I want to walk us through. And so the first part of our discussion will sort of be sort of an overview of sort of different concepts and constructs related to some topics in child mental health. And then we will move into more of a question answer discussion at the end. But again, feel free to put questions in the chat as we go if things come up. So I took a look to kind of find out what are the impacts of a global pandemic on children's mental health. And I'm sure that if you are a parent or if you've been working with young people, you've certainly seen some of what some of these outcomes are. And one of the things that we definitely know is that children are being exposed to large amounts of information regarding the pandemic. And so that could be through the news channels or TV, There's a lot right now, obviously on social media, and even we as adults are probably being overwhelmed by the sheer amount of information and who the information is coming from and what information to trust. And it's interesting that I have an 8-year-old who'll be going to the 3rd grade this year. And he does not like watching the evening news. And I realized one evening, um, he just simply put his hand over his ears and he said, "Mommy, I don't like this. I don't want to listen to this." And so that gave me an idea that, okay, so when I'm cooking dinner in the evenings, when I typically have on the evening news, that's something that I have had to think about and something that I've had to consciously not do, was turn on the evening news when I'm cooking dinner because it can be upsetting for my 8-year-old. And so young people sometimes also have high levels of stress um, and anxiety, and sometimes that is a projection of the stress and anxiety that we as adults have. And so I can imagine that everyone on this Zoom call has experienced some type of shift in your everyday life, some type of change, some type of stress, anxiety, or frustration dealing with this pandemic. And so sometimes we unintentionally project those types of feelings and worries and concerns onto our children. So just as we're wanting to teach our children how to cope in different techniques and mechanisms, we have to also look at ourselves and say, how am I coping with this? How am I doing with this? And so our children are very in tune, and they certainly pick up on if we as parents are experiencing challenges or trying to manage. So children also are experiencing great changes and disruption to their daily routines, and that has been one of the number one things in the news lately. And one of the things that I know I've chatted with about my friends and other parents and my neighbors about what are we going to do with school? Like, what happens when school starts? And it started in the spring with home instruction. So our young people and our children, they have not been in their routine for quite a few months. And a disruption to daily routine will sometimes lead to behaviors or other things that we hadn't necessarily seen previously with our children. And we certainly know that some children need a routine. They need a routine. They need a schedule. Your household might run better when things are in place. And maybe lately you've been finding that things just aren't in place. Like, it's difficult to get things to fall back into place. And then, if children are experiencing a high amount of anxiety or feelings that they haven't necessarily felt before that they want to work through, you may see these feelings being acted out in behaviors that you didn't previously notice or see as a problem. So for young people that may have siblings, maybe you see that they're fighting with each other more, or they're arguing more, or they're having more difficulty getting along. Maybe you're seeing a child who was previously easygoing and happy. Maybe they are more tearful, or they get upset easily, and that's not something that you've seen before. So we have seen differences in how children have been able to adjust to the pandemic and everything associated with it through their behaviors. So, one of the areas that we have seen in terms of what young people are experiencing, and I always kind of start with our seniors, with our 12th graders, in that if you think about your own 12th grade year and maybe what that looked like, no matter how long ago or how recent, we know that there's a lot that happens in that year. There's a lot that happens. There's prom, there's pictures, there's senior trips, there's outings, there's so many social things and so many things that happen. And so for some of the older kids, they may be sensing loss or grief in that they don't have the opportunity to participate in these activities this year, or these activities are very different, or they may not have the typical graduation. So there are many things that our young people are experiencing that are different, that they may feel like that they are losing out on. And we have to be sensitive to their grief and loss process and how they manage that. And so we may sometimes see behaviors or feelings around irritability. So sometimes you just may be totally irritable that things just aren't working out how you had planned. And part of that requires that we as parents and caregivers and teachers and adults who are working with young people be sensitive to what it must feel like to not be able to do the things that you have been planning since maybe you were a freshman in high school. So our children have also lost, you know, the opportunity to be a part of their sports team, band, cheerleading, other social clubs, choir, any type of extracurricular activity. Some of these have been limited, and I know our governor, he's going to talk about sports this afternoon on his 2 o'clock briefing. So I'm sure there are plenty of parents and young people who will be tuning in to find out more about what he will say about that. And then young people having limited contact with their extended family, friends, and social networks. And so we know that, social media is kind of one form of social networking that young people are a part of, and how they stay connected to friends. What we're finding out more and more during pandemic is that young people, while social media can be a way to bridge that connection, uh, they prefer the in-person contact. So they want to have the in-person contact with their friends. They want to see each other, and not just their friends. They want to see their family. So maybe they want to see their extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins, grandparents. A lot of young people look forward to hanging out with their family all summer or during the summer, or maybe taking a vacation. And a lot of things like that are, or a lot of those types of activities right now may have been impacted by the pandemic. Um, so being aware as a parent that our children and young people do want social contact, and it's a really big part of their development in their lives. So, in terms of looking at this kind of terms and social constructs that we are going to explore more today, and it was part of our title. So, teaching resiliency. How can we, as parents and caregivers and teachers and other folks that care about young people, how do we help them through these challenging times? How do we begin to think about that process? So I wanted to give you a definition of resiliency to kind of start with. And so resilience in human development is defined in relation to positive adaptation in the context of significant adversity, emphasizing a developmental systems approach. And as we move through some of the things that we have coming up next in our discussion, particularly looking at some of the practical things we can help with building resiliency with our children, is that we will take a look at sort of the developmental process and stages between younger children and older children, and how we can tailor specific coping mechanisms or skills to each of those different developmental age groups. So, as a person that cares for young people, how do we begin to foster resilience? And so, there are sort of three kind of main areas that a lot of scholars and researchers look at when we think about fostering resilience. And the very first one is caring and supportive relationships. So young people, they need to have caring others, is what I call them, caring others. So that could be you as a parent, a grandparent, aunt, uncle, coach, teacher. So they need adults to look up to, at least one caring adult to look up to that they can trust, so that they can share their experiences with. So they can look at that adult who can model coping skills, who can model behaviors that are positive, so that they're able to handle some of the challenges that come along with facing a global pandemic. So positive and high expectations. And I know a lot of parents may read that one and say, what in the world? Right now, we're just getting by. We're just trying to make it work. And I get it. I totally get that. And some of you may be continuing with home instruction. Some of you may be sending your children back to school. Your daily routine may not be what it was. You may still be trying to piece that together. And so when thinking about positive and high expectations, let's keep it in context in terms of kind of what we're currently going through. So we certainly don't expect, things to be the exact same, being that, we're facing unprecedented times. But so, for example, if there are certain things that, made your household run smoothly. So if your child has chores or different types of things, like we're saying that, keep those things in place. So keep, some of those expectations in place while tuning in to behaviors and feelings that may indicate that we should check in with our children and kind of what they're working through. So, and even academically, like figuring out, what is expected for online learning. So maybe those expectations and how your child learns isn't the same or doesn't quite align as well as when your child was in the classroom. And maybe they're more of a face-to-face learner. And so we do have to sort of adjust our expectations that fit our current context. And then opportunities for meaningful participation. And so again, sort of looking at that family system and how we can help our young people to feel a part of our family system, to feel a part of their classroom. So if you're doing Zoom calls, or if you are doing, or if you're doing the in-person learning and you're going a couple of days a week, and I know teachers have been working exceptionally hard to, make the best of these different types of learning processes. And so, still taking the effort, taking the time to engage our young people so that they feel like that they're also getting something out of their schooling, and that they are a contributing member to the family. So, one of the things that's going to help us as parents, one of the very practical things that I think we can all do that doesn't cost any money, we don't have to go out and get any specialized training. We can just do it. It's something that we're going to learn this morning. So empathy. So empathy is one of the key things that we're going to use to tap into our child's inner feelings and how they're dealing with things. And so Brene Brown, she is a very well-known social worker, actually. And Dr. Brown does a lot of research and work around empathy and vulnerability and leadership and those types of things. And she gives us some really interesting perspectives about how do we build empathy and why is empathy important. So empathy is important because it's our way to connect with our children. And so if we're unable to sort of pick up on cues from our children about how they're feeling, then, we may not necessarily get a match in terms of, oh, I thought my child was just acting out because, they just want to be annoying, like they just want to drive me crazy. It's like, well, now that I think about it, now that I go back and process, there was something underlying that behavior. Was my child actually feeling really anxious? Didn't really have the words to say or use. And so I saw a behavior, or I saw a new behavior that I haven't seen before. And they were trying to show me or tell me something. I just didn't get it. So Brene Brown emphasizes that we should actively participate in perspective taking. So what must it be like for a senior in high school right now? What must it be like for a very social second grader, or a 6-year-old who was so happy to go to kindergarten and now it looks different, who was so excited to catch the bus for the first time? So all these things that that children were anticipating, that brought excitement, those things might not be happening. And so we have to think about, what must it be like to feel that way? And so we want to take a non-judgmental approach. And so we want to validate our children's feelings, to say, yeah, it's just, it's really tough when you were looking forward to catching a bus all summer. And we even sort of practiced, and we walked to the bus stop, and we did all these things, and now it's not going to happen. So, I'm just wondering how you feel inside. So, those are ways that we say, it's different than saying, oh, well, next year you can get, like, you have 7 more years to catch the bus. Like, those sort of responses aren't necessarily helpful, because the child hasn't been heard and their feelings haven't been assessed. And then connecting to emotion and communicating understanding. So that's the core of what empathy is. So we want to connect to the emotion. We want to identify the emotion, or if the child doesn't necessarily have an emotion or can't say what the emotion is, we want to be able to maybe give some examples of what that emotion might be. Or just saying something as simple as, I can see you're having a hard time. That can help as well. And then we communicate understanding back to our children about the emotion and the context in which they're experiencing the emotion, and what we understand about it. So I have a really short video clip that Brene Brown put together regarding empathy. And I think it really drives this point home in that it's very practical, gives us some ideas about what that looks like. So I'm going to share the video with you. Okay, let's see. Okay, give me 1 minute. No, I'm not sharing. All
This is
right.
always the hardest part.
I know.
You got this.
Okay. Okay. So, all right. And you guys are probably back on my screen. So, all right, let me all right. So nope, okay.
Something is happening. I can hear it.
Can you see it?
No.
Okay.
So what is empathy and why is it very different than
Hang on
sympathy?
for a moment.
Sure.
Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection.
Okay.
Empathy, it's very interesting. Teresa Wiseman is a nursing scholar who studied professions, very diverse professions where empathy is relevant and came up with.
All right. And so, yep, we practiced this before our call.
We sure did. We had it just right.
And now, not so much, but it's fine. We'll
Yeah.
just give me 1 more second to figure this out. Okay. Let's see.
Yeah, it's odd. We can just see kind of like a dark blue screen,
Okay.
but not the actual video, even though we could hear it.
Gotcha. Okay. So I'm going to just stop the screen share for a moment and see if it will pop up here.
And if it doesn't work now, we could always come back at the end and try again.
Yeah. I think I know what the issue is. Okay, I got it. So I need to, okay. So I'm going to try this one more time. And you don't see anything, right?
Not right now.
Okay. Okay. What I'll do is, we'll just come back to it.
Oh yeah, there's a good idea from Bree in the chat. She says you could share the link in the comments. And then folks could watch on their own later too.
Okay, sure. All right. So I'll get that.
Yeah, I can probably find it and get it in the comments if you just want to keep going.
All right. Okay. Okay. Now I'm just going to get back to my screen share. All right. Let's see. All right. So we'll come back to the video. I'm sure I can get it going. And so empathy is the ability to take the perspective and then being able to infer another person's emotions or mental state or status through the communication and language. So, for example, if I notice my 8-year-old, if he wakes up and comes downstairs, I can sort of tell through his body language if something's going on. Usually he's bright, bubbly, he's running, he's excited, he's doing all these things. But if he comes downstairs and maybe he's dragging a little bit, those are things I can tap into. Those are things I can notice to say, hey, bud, you seem a little down. Is something going on with you? And maybe he'll say, I really had a bad dream and, I just feel really, nervous or scared right now. And then I can use empathy and say, yeah, so, buddy, you're upset and you're feeling afraid because you had a really bad dream. And then maybe I'll then continue to say, bad dreams can, make us feel really upset. And maybe that's something we can talk about. So, do you want to talk about your dream? So there are several skills here for developing empathy and having empathic responses for our children when they're experiencing either upset feelings or, maybe it's just something they need to process or get through. But our job is to kind of be active listeners and tap into what those feelings might be. So when using empathy, this is a real kind of easy way to think about how to use it. So let's go back to the example of a kindergartner being very excited to catch the bus for the first time. Maggie, you're feeling really sad because you were really looking forward to catching the bus this school year. And so that helps us identify what the feeling is. So what is the feeling? Maggie's feeling really sad and down. And she's feeling sad and down because she was really looking forward to catching the bus and she's not able to do that. So just starting out with a response that contains the feeling and the content associated with it. So we want to listen carefully and we want to make sure we can pull out what the feeling is and then what it's connected to. So Ivy and Ivy kind of gives us 3 different levels of responses that we can respond back to a child or another person. And so level 1 response is you're just totally ignoring what's happening. And so that would be a response like, oh, Maggie, you're just always sad. Like that doesn't say anything. It doesn't help us. Or Maggie, you should really be happy because we're going to meet your teacher on Zoom today. That has nothing to do with Maggie feeling sad about her not being able to get on the bus. So we want to, in that moment, tap into the feeling and the context that the feeling is associated with. We don't want to jump right into trying to fix the issue. We don't have to jump into, you're going to feel better. Let's just get ice cream and it'll all be better. So we actually want to validate the feeling and allow our child to work through that feeling because it lets them know that it's actually okay to feel sad. Like I don't have to brush that feeling aside. I can work through it and I can be okay because I have a caring adult, a trusting adult that can help me with that. Level 2, accurately repeat back to the child what the listener has heard. And so that's what we kind of just did. So Maggie, you're feeling really sad because you're not going to be able to catch the school bus this year. And then level 3, it includes a reflection of what the child has said and additional greater appreciation and sensitivity to the child's thoughts, feelings, and experiences. And so maybe you could add a little bit more to Maggie's statement. So Maggie, I know you're feeling really sad because you were looking forward to catching the bus this year. And now that's not happening. I can see what's making you cry. can we talk about that some? And so that's sort of tapping into the child's feelings. It offers validation and it gives them a safe place to be able to process those feelings. And so, when thinking about feelings, we want to recognize underlying feelings associated with disruptive behavior. And I'm not sure if any of you parents have seen any of behaviors that you haven't seen before, or if you feel like there's new stuff coming at you and you're like, okay, what is this about? But I know when my 8-year-old, when he feels anxious or whatever, especially now, like he can a lot of times show me more than he can tell me about what's happening. So I'll notice, oh, you're just kind of running around in circles. You are jumping on the cat. Like what's going on with you? Or you're just making noise, like just random like noises, like mouth noises, just whatever. And I'm like, what is that? And I'll just kind of slow him down and say, hey, Bryce, it seems like you have a lot of energy right now. Like, do you want to go outside, or you want to take a walk and chat for a little bit? And so I encourage him to kind of talk about what that is. And so what I've been recognizing is that he has actually had a lot of underlying anxiety about school starting, about seeing his friends again, about what school is going to look like. And when he gets in one of those busy bee little modes, I know to kind of check in with him to kind of see like what is driving that. And so we're going to notice the behavior. So we're going to notice if our kid just took the whole box of Kleenex and decided to like rip up all of the tissues. Like, what was that about? Like, that's not something you normally do. And so that's a way to check in. And so we want to hold the correction off before we explore what the behavior is about. So, not walking in and saying like, why would you do that? Like you took all the tissue out and blah, blah, blah. My 8-year-old, he does that with paper towels for some reason, and so sometimes they're showing us that they're having a hard time or trying to deal with something that is bothering them. And so we're going to explore the behaviors, explore the underlying feelings behind the behavior. We're going to respond with empathy. So we learned how to give a more empathic response. And finally, we're going to redirect the behavior if it's a problem. But before the redirection, we have at least like 3 other steps that we need to kind of think about and tune into. So a feelings jar is one of the really cool practical activities that I like doing with my 8-year-old. And the purpose of that is to help elicit his feelings about certain things. And so maybe your child doesn't really have anything going on and you're kind of like, well, I don't know how they feel about whatever. But I use, and I don't really have a jar, but you can use a jar, cup, bowl. I have a little canister, a little old recipe canister. And in my little canister, I cut up pieces of paper and we kind of shake it up. And then Bryce can then choose a feelings word out of the canister. So this one says excited, lonely. And this was one that Bryce had pulled out one day. And he said he was lonely. And my heart just sank. Like I was crushed. I was like, wait, I thought we were playing together, we're spending time together. But he felt really lonely. He really missed his friends. And he hadn't talked about that before. And had I not sort of pulled out our feelings jar, he wouldn't have identified that feeling. But that was a feeling that he felt. And he needed to say that he was lonely. And it was certainly heartbreaking to hear as a parent, but it was a great way to tap in to say, to use empathy to help guide him and to help him to talk about something that was somewhat painful. And so you basically just make whatever kind of jar that you want and ask your child to take out a piece of paper from the jar and to tell you about a time when they've experienced that feeling. And that's a way to sort of deepen that conversation. And so we also want to give our children other ways to positively express their feelings and find healthy ways to have them cope with their feelings and to help build their resiliency. So we want to offer them a safe and healthy environment to do that in. Some of the other things we can do with them are asking them to draw pictures or draw pictures with them. We can ask them to draw pictures about what they think school might be like when school starts, and then ask them to talk about that picture with you. Ask them what they think their classroom might look like when school starts. So there's all kinds of things we can help them through drawing. And so children's natural language is play. And so sometimes we have to engage them through play or through those activities that they naturally communicate through. Playing games is also important. So you can play games with your children to sort of encourage them to talk more or to process some. And I've never learned so much about Pokemon and whatever else. I mean, I don't know. Like, I still don't get it. I don't understand how the cards work. I don't understand how you get points and who has more. It, it drives me insane. But I play Pokemon with Bryce because that's the way I can engage with him. It's a way I can kind of start those conversations if I need to tap into how he's feeling. And then for older kids, sometimes having them listen to music. Sometimes they cope a lot through listening to music. Or now I feel like the TikTok videos are also very interesting because, sometimes they're telling stories through their videos and what they share. So we just have to be open and receptive to listening. And so maintaining contact with caring others, that helps to build resiliency. So whether that's texting, FaceTime, writing letters, that's something that we actually enjoy doing. So, the good old fashioned art of writing a letter. And so maybe getting a family letter chain going, maybe that's a way to keep in contact with grandma or other relatives who you may not be able to see. Zoom, of course, and I'm sure, I think folks are kind of zoomed out, but, there are certainly different other creative ways you can use to keep that contact. And then social distance play dates. So, if, your child wants to see their friends, that's another way. And so establishing a new routine, and I know that might be a little bit challenging as, the school year starts up again, you're probably reestablishing a routine from your summer. And so, you're going to plan your learning time, you're going to plan your play time. And so one of the things that we know that helps to build resiliency is that, if children know what to expect to the best of your ability. I know you can't predict everything, and, schools are certainly changing, and CDC guidelines are changing, and, there's going to be a lot of changes that take place. But we do try and offer just some basic structure so that children feel safe and have some type of routines that are regular for them. So planning playtime, offer unstructured time. And so Bryce is an only child, and I know that I'm the playmate, so I have to be mom and playmate, and I have to be very mindful of planning things that he would like to actually do, like play Pokemon. So I just have to mentally get myself ready to engage in Pokemon battles, which is fine. So maybe trying a new and safe socially distanced activity. And then engage your child in the play of their choice. And so, again, whatever your child likes, it's important to engage them that way. And modeling, so we as adults, we're going to model for the child how to get through the pandemic, right? Now, if we're walking around stressed out and full of anxiety, and that's kind of spilling over to our children, they're going to be experiencing those same things, right? So we have to kind of get ourselves together, which means that if you need to take a step back, if you need a break, maybe you just need time, 30 minutes, an hour, however long that you can get. Maybe you have to go upstairs and hide in the closet or a bathroom or somewhere, just so you can have a little bit of time to decompress. And so that's going to be extremely important, because we're all experiencing greater amounts of stress, and we can only, be as impactful and effective, um, or our children will be as impactful and effective if we can model, what coping looks like, what expressing your feelings looks like, and that kind of thing. And it's okay to say, hey, and I've told my 8-year-old, this pandemic has been pretty challenging, huh? There are times when we're just tired of it. Like, we just want it to be over. But you know what? We're going to fight through it as a family. Like, we're going to hang in there. So, expressing what those feelings are, and then giving a way for you to kind of fight back as a family. And so we're offering reassurance to children. And so children may need more reassurance that although things, aren't how we would like them, we still have other things to tap into. And just to, give your child the reassurance that things will work out eventually. And maybe not exactly how they were before, but we're looking forward to when things are going to look a little bit different. So some kids may need more snuggles, hugs, hand holding, more comfort during these times. And so finally, I just put some kid-friendly resources on here. Cincinnati Children's Hospital has some really good 1-minute videos that look at COVID-19, explains it very well in kids' language. It gives you some other videos as well. NBC Nightly News Kids Edition. So I don't watch the regular nightly news with Bryce around, because it upsets him. And so, but that's another good resource. And then finally, just limit your news and media related to content, related content to COVID. And so that's the end of that. And I want to open up for questions. Questions or comments, whatever.
Yeah, I will say one thing I was thinking about when you were talking about Pokemon and how it's not really your thing and you don't understand. But, kids have experienced, like, so much has happened to them in the pandemic. I am sure it is super helpful to have an outlet in a scenario where your child is the expert and your child can tell you how to play the game and what to do, like restoring a little bit of that agency to him, no matter how small, I bet is really helpful.
Yes.
Yeah. What are other folks thinking about? Have you seen any changes in your children's behavior? Feel free to unmute yourself if you want to talk, or just drop something in chat. Let's see a thank you from someone. Yes, thank you for being here. See an acknowledgement that we have certainly dealt with stress as parents, and it has spilled over to our kids. Absolutely, it's hard. Uncertainty and constant changing directives is challenging.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. And that's going to be something that we all experience as we head into the fall. Things are going to continue to change. Bree says, I focused on managing my response to all of this as my kids feed off my emotions and reactions.
Yes, that's absolutely true. Yep.
Yeah. And thanks for the feelings activity. Yeah, that does sound super helpful, because you don't necessarily have to react to a feeling in the moment. And it could be easier to talk about the feelings that you're experiencing when they're not, at their like peak urgency.
Mm-hmm.
Got the link for the NBC Nightly News Kids Edition there too, if folks wanted to check that out. All right. Oh, yeah, I've got one more coming in. I have an issue with one side of the family not taking the guidelines seriously, and they've been telling my daughter that I'm trying to socially isolate her and keep her from her family, which is not the case. This is confusing her. How do we address this additional stress factor? God, that's so
Yeah.
hard. Such a good
Yeah,
question.
that is a really good question. And, when you're trying to, recognize safety and keep your children safe and keep your family members safe, it is difficult when your child is hearing two different things. And especially when they're hearing someone else say that it's you as a parent who's keeping them, from, and enjoying their friends or family. And so I think part of that as parents is, one thing we can try is to openly communicate with the other adults who are involved, to kind of express our thoughts and ideas about what's happening, so that the child is not in the middle of this. And I know we can't control other people's um, behaviors in terms of what they might say and the messages that they are sending our children. Um, but we have to um, do what we have to do as parents to make sure that our children are safe, and that if we believe that following certain guidelines are going to maintain their safety, then you have to be okay with that. To say that I'm making a conscious choice to keep my family safe and to keep my child safe, and to be okay with that. And maybe they have to think about visiting more on Zoom or different platforms if you don't believe that, the other part of the family is taking these things seriously. Or, maybe you set up a play date or something or a family visit where you can sort of better monitor the social distance. So maybe you choose a park or somewhere where there's space to sort of, compromise with the other family member, so that they feel like they can see the child and the child can see them.
We've so often been in situations, at least I personally have been,
Mm-hmm.
where, there are different expectations
Sure.
about how we're going to interact and
Mm-hmm.
socially distance. So do you think there's value in like showing your children how like there is even still conflict between adults, and we're going to work together to find a place where everyone is comfortable?
Sure. I mean, I think that's a great idea. And
Yeah.
again, I think when you have that conversation, having the conversation with other adults and, sort of, not placing that burden on the child to be able to figure out and to make sense of. So, communicating to the child effectively so that they understand what decision that you're trying to make with other family or friends.
Aaron says, great point. We too struggle with this. Often we have parental discussions that are very difficult, such as returning to school, and the kids overhear and get worried or anxious because we are worried and anxious. How much of these discussions should we try to keep them from being exposed to versus letting them see how their parents are struggling through difficult decisions?
Mm. I think there's a certain level of sharing that is probably a little bit more appropriate, in that, we as a family have some very tough decisions to make about the return to school. And I don't know that you have to get into the details with the child, but you can explain. Well, first of all, you can tap into how they feel about it. So we're going to start with the feelings part. So we're exploring feelings, we're validating feelings. And then you as a parent then can say, you know, we're really struggling too with the decision. So we're making the best decision based on what the doctors say or what the researchers say, or however that you're making your decision. Maybe you're making your decision based on whether or not your school can follow the CDC guidelines. So I think you can have a conversation about how you're going to make the decision, and maybe saying it's tough, and you can use those types of uh, feelings words or whatever to convey to your child that it's nothing that you're taking lightly. But, we also want to protect our children from having to take on our anxieties and our concerns that really aren't appropriate for them to have to carry.
Um, Yeah, one more comment was shared. Even my husband and I have different perspectives on this and have to find a compromise. Same. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. Every day is a new negotiation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, a lot of this presentation, I feel like could really apply to adults as well.
Yeah.
We all have big feelings that need validating right
Yeah.
now.
Yeah. And especially when you're working with your spouse or partner to be able to make a decision, like you have to have empathy also for the other person and their feelings and what their thoughts and beliefs are. And so, it's a process to be able to have those open and honest conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, we are just very slightly over our time. If anybody has any last questions or thoughts, please go ahead and put them in the chat. Um, and if not, I will go ahead and say thank you guys all for being here. And thank you so much, Dana, for
Well,
sharing
thank
your
you all.
time and your expertise with us. I know I personally have gotten some really great thoughts and ideas out of this presentation. And I'm so grateful that you were able to be here with us today.
It was nice being with you all. Thank you.